Hi all, welcome to MeDIDa, a podcast analysing all sorts of media about multiplicity and dissociative identity disorder. We're talking about books, movies, television, gaming, and more. Whether it's overt or covert, intentional or unintentional, I want to talk about it. I'm your podcast host, Avodacat. I am a fully fused system, and I am constantly intrigued by the way that media seems to be unable to capture the DID experience, while media that is not intending to do it does so well. So if you, like me, have opinions about these things, come along to join in the discussion. Now, this podcast is not specifically here to educate about DID or multiplicity or plurality. If you want educational content, there is a lot out there, both online and offline. I am not the person to get it from. I am not a DID educator. This podcast is recorded on Kaurna country, and I extend my respects to the traditional custodians of the land and the elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. This is still stolen land without any Indigenous treaty. The land I am on impacts how I go about my day-to-day life, including my media analysis, so this acknowledgement of country is important. Today, we will be discussing the television show The United States of Tara, which ran from 2009 to 2011 for 3 seasons. The series was created by Diablo Cody, who attempted to strike a balance between something that was somewhat comedic and entertaining while still being sensitive of a heavily stigmatized disorder. Whether she succeeded is up for debate. I believe there was a professional psychology consultant for the scripts, but I don't know if there was anybody on the creative team that actually had experience with DID. It starred Toni Collette as the titular Tara, a suburban housewife with DID. Toni Collette plays her husband Max, Brie Larson plays her daughter Kate, Kerr Gilchrist plays her son Marshall, and Rosemary DeWitt rounds out the main cast as Tara's sister Charmaine. In this discussion, I will be spoiling the majority of major plot points in the show, so if you are interested in watching it for yourself, please do, but be aware that it is for mature audiences. I was able to watch this on SBS On Demand, and hopefully you can find a place to view this series. I'm not going to be doing a complete breakdown, but I will hopefully provide enough context that you should be able to understand this discussion even if you haven't watched the show. While this show does focus on Tara and her struggles with DID, different alters fronting and overstepping boundaries, the memory gaps that come with the dissociative barriers between these different parts, other primary characters also have their own storyline, which makes this more of an ensemble show. I do enjoy the fact that other characters get their own storyline, and that it's not just completely about the DID all of the time. But for the purposes of this review, I will be focusing on the storylines that are specifically related to Tara and her alters. Also, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to use Tara to refer to both the host alter as well as the overall system, as the system doesn't really have a name independent of the legal host name. At the beginning of the show, there are 4 main alters that we become aware of. Tara, the host, who works as an interior designer / artist. And then you have T, who is a rebellious teenage version of Tara, who seems to also be a sort of sexual and emotional protector. You have Buck, who is a Vietnam War veteran and initially the only known male alter. He seems to be a physical protector. And there's Alice, a trad wife, who also appears to be a bit of a gatekeeper, meaning she knows a lot about the other alters and potentially has some control over who has what information and who is allowed to front at any specific time. We find out over the course of the show that Alice is likely an introject of a foster parent, Mimi, who was present during a particularly traumatic time. Over the course of the show, additional alters come to light, some of which seem to have split recently, others of which may have been dormant within the system. In Season 1, we learn about Gimme, who is an animalistic alter, who seems to be a purely emotional part. And then in Season 2, we get Shoshana Schoenbaum, an introject therapist alter, and Chicken, who is a child alter, or commonly referred to as a little. Then in season 3, we get Bryce, who is an introject of Tara's older half-brother and childhood abuser and a system persecutor, who unfortunately does play into the evil alter trope somewhat. One of the main reoccurring plot threads throughout the show is trying to figure out what the root of Tara's DID is, as the characters believe that that is the way to figure out how to fix the DID. Now, I am far from the only person with DID to have an opinion about the United States of Tara, as for a long time this was really the only mainstream thing about DID other than Sybil. So there is a lot you can probably find out there reviewing this media. The Entropy System, I know, did a review many years ago on their YouTube channel, as they have a series also reviewing DID in media, and I do agree with a lot of their points. I find myself personally not quite having as negative a reaction to it, but that's not to say I necessarily have a positive reaction to it either. My personal opinion is a bit more of a mixed bag. I first watched the show many years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but it was before I was aware of my own multiplicity at the time, which was definitely before 2015. While I do think that overall this has much better representation than most portrayals of DID, it still definitely has a lot of issues. I actually struggled to accept my own disorder because of how differently I presented compared to the show, as Tara's DID is extremely overt, meaning that it is externally clear to everyone when there has been an identity shift. However, DID is a protective trauma-based developmental disorder. The majority of those who have it will present covertly, meaning that it will not be explicitly obvious externally or even internally when a switch has occurred. The disorder creates a protective dissociative amnesia to allow apparently normal functioning. It is often a difficult process for somebody to become aware of their DID. Denial is often a protective part of the disorder. It's not to say that it's impossible for those with DID to realize it and recognize it within themselves. Obviously they can, but it's usually a deep internal reflective experience rather than an external one where people can point out to you and go, look, alter. As Tara and the other alters begin the show already aware of their DID, we can't exactly be sure about the process that the realization came about, but given the fact that Tara often receives information about what alters have done by external people after the fact, it's not a stretch to conclude there was little to no internal communication between the alters at the beginning of the series. As Tara's DID is very overt, the majority of the main characters are able to identify which alter is out almost immediately, as the alter almost immediately changes clothes and does not ever attempt to pass for Tara. It's very caricaturish. While it is common for alters or parts within systems to have their own styles, and there is some level of performativity when fronting, when trying to express that style, this show really takes it to an extreme. Additionally, the show calls switching, the process of one alter literally switching out to control the body for another, as transitioning. And I'm not sure whether this is just outdated terminology or if it's just straight up incorrect, but it really caught me off guard in my most recent watch through because that is not what that word means. The show depicts a regular suburban family in the late 2000s/early 2010s, which is to say, dysfunctional. Tara and her alters are caricatures that lack any accountability or much desire for growth. Max has a savior complex to the point at which when he thinks Tara is cured, he buys a house just to have something to fix. And the two kids are emotionally neglected. None of the characters are overly likable. But sometimes that's just what people are like, you know? For me, unlikable characters in a TV show are not a deal breaker. For the most part, Tara's family is accepting of the condition, and they have varying relationships with each of the alters. The one major exception to this is Charmaine, Tara's sister, who initially does not believe Tara actually has DID.
I mean, it's not even a real disease, Max.
It's real, Charmy.
It's not a disorder. It's a weakness.
Right? She does it to herself. You know that.
Given that Charmaine has known Tara the longest, it is interesting that she is the character who denies the condition the most, as she has likely seen the most evidence of it. It also hints that Tara's family and the environment that the sisters grew up in may have been less than ideal, which is pretty typical of people with DID and childhood trauma. As we learn more about Tara and Charmaine's parents and their upbringing, it becomes clear that it was not the most loving, stable home life for the two of them. While the majority of the characters we see seem to accept Tara's DID, Charmaine is not the only person with a dismissive attitude. In Season 3, Tara decides to go to university and study psychology and meets a professor who believes that DID just does not exist. This is, unfortunately, a relatively realistic experience, particularly for the time period. While DID has been in the DSM for some time now, the spectacle of the disorder has garnered many critics, academic and otherwise. It is not uncommon for people with DID to be dismissed or called liars or quote-unquote fake claimed by other people, including professionals in the field of psychology. The first psychiatrist I saw personally was a bit like this. While she didn't necessarily say that DID wasn't real, she told me that I could not possibly have DID because I was too functional, and that if I really did have it, we would both be in the newspaper tomorrow, implying that somehow it would be earth-shatteringly groundbreaking for a human being to actually have the disorder. Many of you may be familiar with such cases as Sybil and the controversy surrounding that, which has led to the general public largely regarding the disorder as fake and attention-seeking. So even though it is a frustrating stance to see in the show, I do appreciate that the show demonstrates these critical voices and their impact, because it is very real and very harmful part of living with DID. Additionally, there are people who are well-meaning, but say very harmful and uneducated things.
You know, the weird thing is like, kind of feel like everyone has it. You know, a little bit. It's like over the course of a day, how many different women do we have to be?
The everyone has it a little bit is a common phrase heard by almost any neurodivergent person, which does include DID. It is a literal neurological diversity. This is a relatively realistic interaction, unfortunately. However, it is important to note that yes, everyone does have some element of identity shifting or masking throughout the day, depending on the situation. This is different from DID for many reasons that I am hoping should be relatively obvious. Most people without DID do not experience the dissociative memory barriers, the headaches, and the significant identity switches associated with DID. Additionally, this show portrays people who are overly fascinated by the disorder, people who are maybe only interested in you because of the DID.
I want to meet one.
Oh, Tiffany, you don't.
No, I
No,
do.
you
I
don't.
do.
Not a dancing monkey.
No, come on. Hello. Who's in there? Come out and have a drink with us.
The spectacle of it, being treated like sideshow entertainment, is very dehumanizing. So yeah, while this line of thinking from others is not pleasant, portraying it, and in its full uncomfortable glory, is very realistic. Even though it's not a perfect depiction, the show does go some way to dispelling some of the harmful ideas around DID. From the pilot episode, there is an implication that Tara was on drugs to manage her DID, and now that she's off the medication, she is switching between alters.
Look, we knew when you went off the meds the whole gang would resurface.
The specifics of the medication Tara is on changes over the show, but the overall implication is that she is on some kind of antipsychotic medication and / all mood stabilizer, or a mix of several different psychiatric medications. While mood stabilizers may help control emotional-based switches, there's no medication that actually works the way that the show implies medication works. I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, there is not any medication that can consistently suppress dissociation or switches within DID. In fact, brain fog, which is similar to dissociation, is often a side effect of a lot of psychiatric medication, which would probably have the opposite effect and increase switching. DID is not something you can medicate away, despite the fact that the show implies that you can use drugs as an autosuppressant many times. Speaking of switching, while emotional stresses definitely can be triggers for switching, there can be many other triggers, such as sound or smell or sensation that triggers a memory or even just an association for an alter, which is something that is discussed a little bit within the show.
So the disassociation happens when you have a trigger, right? Sorry, thank you. And is the trigger something that reminds you of, like, some bad thing that happened to you, or what?
Yeah, but a lot of the triggers are just weird, like the smell of instant coffee or something. I mean, I have no idea what that means.
Sometimes switching can be purposeful and intentional, while other times it can be accidental and unpredictable. During the first 2 seasons, Tara seems to have little to no control over these switches, only gradually being able to gain it when she becomes more co-conscious with the other alters and opens internal communication. Tara also experiences very fast switches, and while fast switches are not necessarily uncommon, most systems experience a variety of lengths of times and periods of dissociation while switching. I suspect that this choice was made largely due to the format of this medium, the fact that watching somebody dissociate for extended periods of time would probably be a bit boring to watch, and take up valuable screen time in a short-running 30-minute episode block. Tara also goes to therapy throughout the course of the show. In the first season, she's seeing Dr. Ocean, who does give some good insight into her disorder and encourages natural, slower discovery rather than trying to force things.
That's why the system was created, to protect you.
Notably, Dr. Ocean is not an expert on DID, which is fairly common as there are not many therapists who specialize in the area. But she does work on educating herself on the condition. Towards the end of the first season, she recommends that Tara seek a specialist, and she ends up going to an intensive treatment clinic for DID, which has a focus on getting to the root of her trauma. Now, I thought Dr. Ocean was a pretty good therapist, but I found the intensive treatment clinic and Dr. Holden to be very weird. Now, the show is set in the US, and I have no real experience with that system. I cannot say whether any of this is accurate to what some treatment centers are like, but I do not think that the treatment approach used in this show was very useful or up to scratch. Potentially it's just outdated, but specifically searching for root traumas is very much not a currently advised treatment and can be very harmful and destabilizing. Trauma therapy rarely comes in the form of trying to find out exactly what happened, nor does it generally involve directly confronting the person who is believed to have caused the trauma. This clinic also uses a drug called sodium pentothal to induce dissociation in an attempt to bring alters out, which is a little bit troubling to me, and to my knowledge is not, or at least should not, be a normal part of DID treatment. But it's the US, so who knows? People have all sorts of horror stories of treatments that psychs put them through. I personally couldn't find anything about this drug being used in DID treatment, but my searching was pretty limited. The main thing that troubles me is that none of these treatments are framed as a problem within the show other than how prohibitively expensive they are. It's just seen as part of the process. Again, drugs are not overly useful as mechanisms for controlling switching or helping somebody with DID beyond symptom management. During season 1, Tara and her family were acting under the belief that an incident in boarding school while Tara was a teenager was the cause of the DID. But it comes to light that the event was likely a re-traumatization rather than the initial traumatic event. Season 2, however, begins with Tara seemingly cured, so she's not seeing any therapists or in any treatment. However, this turned out to not be the case. And then Tara begins seeing a new therapist, Shoshana Shambaum, after a recommendation from her neighbor. Shoshana is in New York, so they begin with the phone sessions. However, it is revealed that Shoshana is actually a new alter, and that what is occurring is actually an internal communication, seemingly unbeknownst to both Tara and Shoshana.
Well, that was a lot of mishigas. I've had an easier time getting through the hall and tunnel at rush hour. Who the fuck is this?
This is your mom's new therapist, Shoshana Schoenbaum.
That book I gave her to?
Yeah.
By my old therapist?
Yeah.
This makes some sense, as Tara is in a state of denial of her switching at this time, along with reliving the turmoil of childhood memories. It's not unusual for new alters to not recognize that they are part of a system or be in denial about it, as denial is a very real and common part of DID. Tara does not have any external therapist in this season, though she does continue to investigate her past and delve into her childhood memories in an attempt to figure out what happened to her. This is not advisable without the support of healthcare professionals, as even though Tara is obviously experiencing distress with these memories resurfacing, treating your life and trauma like it's a mystery novel will almost definitely not have the cathartic conclusion you will hope for, and will more likely than not result in re-traumatization. Which is kind of what happens, as Season 2 ends with the reveal that Tara experienced extreme and ongoing childhood abuse from her older half-brother Bryce. This revelation results in an alter waking from dormancy, Bryce an introject of this abuser. Season 3 sees Tara going back to college and enrolling in a psych course, where the teacher, Dr. Hattress, is firmly of the opinion that dissociative identity disorder does not exist.
What if DID, which incidentally is rarely diagnosed outside North America, doesn't actually exist? Perhaps DID is nothing more than an excuse, a crutch that severely damaged people used to hide behind, to avoid facing the reality of the pain they are feeling. Or is it a performance they put on merely to get attention? And you did get our attention. Now, if you have read my work, and please don't patronize me, you will know which side of the debate I sleep on. But perhaps I'm wrong.
He reveals this opinion after Tara has already disclosed to him her DID diagnosis. At first, this man is absolutely insensitive and an asshole. However, as Dr. Hattress watches Tara, his opinion changes and he begins to try to help her.
You give me one last good reason why I should do this?
His name is Jeremiah, and he hadn't left his room in over 2 years, afraid that if he went outside, he would quite literally lift off and float away like a common kite. Today, he lives in London, drives cabs, dates women, and visits his mum every Sunday.
I don't want to visit my mom.
What I'm saying is that I have assisted more severe cases than yours, and I'm very, very good at what I do.
Until the incident, when Bryce tries to murder him by instigating an allergic reaction. The series ends with the plan for Tara to go into a specialized treatment clinic in Boston for her DID. Unfortunately, as much as the show does provide a relatively nuanced take on DID for the time, it does fall into some of the harmful tropes of DID media. The most common of which is the evil alter trope, which is fulfilled by Bryce, who becomes apparent during Season 3 when Tara attempts to go back to college. Now, credit where credit is due, this is not the worst representation of evil alters out there. In fact, it is somewhat of a reasonably accurate portrayal of a persecutor alter, as most of the harm is directed internally and is self-inflicted. As Bryce is an introject of the system's primary abuser from childhood, it makes sense that the majority of the negative actions are directed inwards and as self-harm, essentially reliving the trauma and abuse. It also makes sense that Bryce re-emerges during this period, as college or university is a stressful time, and when Tara was originally attempting college, there is an implication that Bryce also caused harm that resulted in the system not being able to finish their education, along with the reveal from Season 2, bringing this childhood trauma information to light. There's something about the specific stress of college or university, maybe the environmental change that comes with it, that tends to destabilize systems or make them more apparent. In my anecdotal experience, the amount of systems that realize they are systems or get diagnosed during college or university is like weirdly high. However, despite all the things that the show does well, there are quite a lot of missteps when it comes to Bryce. The framing of Bryce as scary and dangerous and evil without any interrogation of this is an issue. The show was not originally planning to end at the end of season 3, so they may have potentially been planning more with Bryce's storyline, but as it stands, it is very much playing into the stigmatization of the disorder. Additionally, Bryce goes around murdering the other alters, and the season ends with him being confronted and killed by Tara. This is not a thing! Alters can't die internally. Alters can become dormant, they can change, they can fuse with other alters, but they can't die. The show also doesn't fully commit to this concept, having the original 3 alters, other than Tara, T, Alice, and Buck, show up at the end of the series, which further implies that Bryce hasn't been fully dealt with either. The whole series does have an issue with how overt and over-dramatized the switches are, and how outrageous the alters act, and this is taken to a new extreme with Bryce. It feels excessive, and definitely doesn't help the idea that persecutors are dangerous and evil, and basically that they just need to be gotten rid of. I apologize to all the persecutors out there. You are not beyond help. Again, perhaps they were going to delve further into it if the show continued, but where we ended was rather tragic. I want to be clear. DID does not make a person more or less likely to hurt someone. Anyone has the capacity to cause harm. Persecutors are more likely to cause harm to themselves than anyone external. You may have even heard the statistic that people with DID are more likely to be harmed by others than to cause harm to others. People with DID and other kinds of multiplicity are not inherently dangerous because of their plurality. That needs to be clear. And this show does not make that clear. I do have to applaud that this show is not afraid of portraying this disorder as something difficult to live with, as a disorder.
I don't always understand the reasons I do what I do when I lose time, hence the word dissociation, which pretty much means I black out a lot. But I keep hoping that someday I'll be all here all the time.
Tara struggles to maintain any friendships outside of her immediate family due to the DID, and is also distressed that there is so much of her life that she cannot remember.
It isn't just that I can't remember whole chunks of my childhood, or almost killing our children, and it doesn't only happen when the alters are out and doing stuff that I don't know about. I've been fading in and out forever, Max.
Strain is put on her relationship with her children and husband because of the actions of the alters. There are also extended periods of time where the alters are not present. Season 2 begins with Tara believing them to be gone, as none have fronted for 3 months.
I mean, are we sure they're all gone?
Yeah, it's been 3 months.
It is not an uncommon experience to feel as if alters are gone if they are dormant for extended periods of time. There genuinely does seem to have been a lot of thought and care taken to try to represent this disorder as a disorder and not just a spectacle. Somehow, it is the only disorder that Tara has, though society today is still by and large trying to wrap their heads around comorbidities. So I can't really fault the show for this one, but I don't know any other systems that don't have some sort of other comorbidities going on. So, like, as much as the DID is shown as disordered, the fact that it's not disordered with other disorders, not super realistic. The internal system world in Tara is a bit of a mystery. We don't get to see very much of it. Throughout the first season, we don't really get any glimpses of the internal world at all, or much indication that there is one. Tara admits that she is completely unaware of where she is when she is not fronting. The other alters discuss communicating with each other or being aware of Tara's actions before they came to front, but there's no mention of where any of this dialogue takes place. Some alters seem to be more aware of things than others, but Tara is the most unaware out of all of them.
Like how you always recognize stuff even if Tara wasn't around.
Yeah, maybe I don't remember Alice making chicken with cornflakes, but when you or one of the kids tell me, I can feel it's true, like somewhere in another room in my head that I'm not privy to.
As the series goes on, Tara gains some ability to be co-conscious with some of the alters. There are also occasional scenes where Tara and another alter appear to physically be in the same room, which is obviously not literal, but it's likely implying a level of co-consciousness. In Season 3, we begin to see some of the internal world, where the alters are having a conversation around a conference room, having a discussion around how to essentially achieve functional multiplicity.
There are rules about when and where the alters can take over the body, and ways of opening channels of communication, and punishment for those who go against the agreement. It's the first time I've ever had anything close to this kind of system in place.
One thing that does bother me when we see Tara's inner world is that all the alters still look the same. They're all still played by Toni Collette. I understand that this works for visual cohesion within the show, because it matches what the audience sees on the outside, but it's not a good representation of alters in an inner world. Alters such as Tea or Chicken would look literally younger. Gimme would probably look more like an animal. Alice would look a lot more like Mimi. Buck would be a man. I get that the show was not able to for a variety of reasons. It would have been difficult not only to convey this visually and still understand that these are the same people, but also hiring all new actors for a short one-off scene that you may want to consistently create in the future would be difficult. So I can partly forgive them for this. But at the same time, I do wish that more of an effort was made to represent internally what DID looks like, and not just what it appears to be as an external observer. There are some interesting discussions of sexuality through the show. It is a mature program, so there are a lot of discussions about sexual activity and sexual scenes through the show. For Tara and her system, there is a large assumption of heteronormativity. However, the presence of Buck complicates things. Buck is a male alter who is also straight, but as Tara is a woman, his presence causes her to question her own sexuality.
Oh, geez, it's another dude. Great. Such a lesbian.
It is fairly common in plural systems to have diversity of gender and sexualities. There can be many reasons for these variations, and it is fairly common overall for people with neurodivergence to be queer in some way, to the point where there's even a term for it, neuroqueer. If you want to read more about that, I would recommend Nick Walker's book on neuroqueer heresies, which does largely focus on autism, but as I've said earlier, neurodivergence is a large spectrum, and it includes any deviation away from typical neurological functioning, including DID. The show also brings up the issue of monogamy and plurality. Tara is married to Max, and they are in a monogamous relationship.
I'd stand up in front of all these people and I'd say, I love this woman. Then I'd look in your eyes and I'd say, if you're Tara, I'll be Max. But if you're Gimme, I'll be Gotcha. And if you're Buck, I'll be your bike. If you're Alice, I'll be your astronaut. And I'd carry Chicken to the car, even though I knew she was pretending to be asleep.
When many people share one body, and that one body is expected to be tied to one person sexually, things do not always work out super smoothly. Within the show, it is complicated by the fact that even though Max loves and cares for the other alters, Tara and Max have an agreement that he is not to have sex with any of the other alters.
Doesn't feel right, sorry.
What? This is your wife's body. Just because I'm not her doesn't mean we can't hook up.
We know from experience, Tara wouldn't like that.
While several alters are frustrated by this because they would also like to have a sexual relationship with Max, there are alters who would prefer to pursue relationships outside of Max. Buck and T are the main examples of this, which has led to affairs and cheating within their relationship.
No, I mean, seriously, how many people have your alter slept with since you've been married?
I counted once. In our life, I think it's somewhere between 33 and 35.
There is never any acceptable reason for cheating. But I do think that these things reveal something about the way that Tara's system works. Specifically what I'm talking about is that Tara, the alter and the host, does not believe that she is an alter. She is happy to call the other parts alters, but she sees herself as Tara, the real one, and not just a part of the system.
The alters? They're not me.
She has built this hierarchy on the idea that she has DID. She has alters. And not seeing that she is a part of the DID system. And she is an alter herself. This concept is occasionally challenged in minor ways over the course of the show.
I wasn't kidding when I said I thought you were an alter. I'm really worried.
You think I'm an alter? Me?
However, Tara still spends the whole show believing herself to be the most important part of the system.
From now on, my life will be organized. My life, my liberty, my pursuit of happiness. These things will bend to my will. I will be in control. Me, Tara. End of story. You act like spoiled brats and then you leave me holding the bag. So, we are going to draw up a contract. All of you will write down what's important to you and what you want out of life. And then I alone, will decide how we go about it.
Doesn't sound like no democracy to me.
Well, it ain't. But I am dissolving the United States of Terra and declaring myself king. And if y'all don't like it, you can kiss my ass, because I'll go back on the drugs, and you'll go back in the closet.
While some systems do believe that there is an original, someone who everyone else split from, the majority of systems, to my understanding, don't hold that belief. Particularly since current understanding of the structural dissociation that causes DID is that it does not fragment a whole person, but rather prevents the integration of a solid, singular identity. There cannot be an original because identity is not something you are born with. It's something that forms throughout life from experience and core beliefs and so on. This hierarchical understanding of Tara may have been something the show was planning to tackle beyond their third season, but we didn't get beyond a third season. We can only judge what we have. The United States of Tara definitely is not a perfect piece of media about DID, but it is also overall more positive than negative, in my opinion. While it does fall into some harmful stereotypes and over-dramatizes and sensationalizes the disorder somewhat, it also provides a lot of genuinely positive representation and education to the general public. There is a lot within the show that I can relate to, but there's also a hell of a lot more that I don't relate to. While the team seemingly tried their best, it doesn't seem like there was anybody with DID who was really that involved. And so it does not really provide much of an example of the lived experience of DID. Like I said, I watched the show before I was aware that I was a system, and it didn't provide me with anything that felt or looked like my experience. By and large, this show feels like it was made for the outside observer rather than for people living with DID. So, I would rate the United States of Tara a 3 out of 5 for DID representation. If you've seen the show and you are using it as your only source of information about DID, you'll most definitely have to do more research. I would never recommend a single source of media for all of your education, but this is not the one to pick. It's not a bad starting point, but it is only a starting point. Let me know how you would rate the United States of Tara for DID representation. And if you have any comments or suggestions for topics to cover on MeDIDa, or you would like to be a guest on an episode, you can contact us at MeDIDapodcast@gmail.com. I've been Avadacat, this has been MeDIDa, and it's time to switch out.